Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's Pirate Peyton, Jake Bell, and Nathan Schivins here. Welcome back to episode dos of the BCS Podcast. Lots to discuss. Skenes fever. We all have Skenes fever. We are all very excited. Me and Nathan plan on going Saturday to go see the 6'6" giant who averages 100 mile an hour on his fastball. And we're very, very excited about that. So the first thing I do want to get into is first of all, was this the right time to call up Skenes? And do we think this will provide a spark for this offense? Even though he can't hit, he can't hit. I wish he could, honestly, because he might do better than some people in this offense. How are we feeling right now about Paul Skenes coming to Pittsburgh?
Yeah, so kind of mixed feelings about this personally. Obviously, was it the right time to call Paul Skenes up? I don't know if there's a right time. I mean, the pitching staff has been really good up to this point. You don't necessarily need another arm. We all know the problem with this team right now is the bats. The offense has still, congratulations, you scored 4 runs against the Anaheim Angels, but the offense still has so much to work on. Andy Haynes still employed somehow, and I don't know. I mean, he did hit an Air Force, right? I mean, maybe he could be like a Shohei, a Shohei Otani, but for the
Part of me
Pirates.
wishes we
But
didn't have the DH so he could just hit, again.
yeah,
Ban the
yeah.
DH.
But yeah, I mean, he's such a good pitcher. I mean, he just dominated AAA, with a 1 ERA, striking out like 45 and 27 innings. It's insane. And I think he's going to continue to carry that to the major league level for the Pirates. But we all know that pitching's not the problem. They're probably going to send down Quinn Priester, I'd imagine. So that's, Quinn Priester was pretty good so far. That last start wasn't great, but I don't know. And could it provide a spark? I think it could, to be honest. I know, I feel like this is just a move to distract from the major league product on the field now with the offense. But he's so good, and you could ride a pitcher like that for sure. Just like you could ride a hitter, like O'Neal Cruz if he starts getting going, or Brian Reynolds. Your offense could ride that, and your team could ride that. So I think it could definitely provide a spark, but we won't know until he gets a few starts. But he's such a good pitcher. I like the move. I like the move. I'm glad that they did it sooner rather than later. This is a team that has brought up their top prospects later than a lot of teams, like the Henry Davis, O'Neal Cruz. They were brought up, mid to late June when they were brought up for their major league debuts. So I'm glad that the Pirates were a little bit quicker with bringing up Paul Skenes. But and he's such a good pitcher, and you look at the 1-2-3 we could have with Skenes, Keller, and Jones, with nice Martin Perez in the back end. I like where our pitching's at. The bullpen we'll see, David Bednar, but I like the move at this time. I'm glad they did it now instead of later.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
personally,
go ahead.
no, you're good. I
I
was
was
just
just
gonna
gonna say, I'm gonna give go.
You're good, Peyton.
I think we're gonna get. All I was gonna say was that when I bought the tickets, I was like, Bob, you did it again. You sucked us in. Saturday afternoon, we're gonna sell out once again. He's gonna bring up that prospect. We're still gonna be bad, but we gotta sell out. The Yinzers are falling for it, like me. We're all getting all hyped about it. But go ahead, Jake.
No, you're good. I was
Go
just
ahead.
gonna say, bringing up Paul Skenes is definitely a spark. I'm a little surprised that they didn't send down Priester and then bring up another bullpen arm, just because Skenes isn't gonna start till Saturday, and it would be nice to have an extra bullpen arm for a game or two. But I understand, because Paul Skenes is an important guy on your team. You want him to be in Pittsburgh for a while to kind of, be with the team for more than just, a couple of days. You want him to be on the team this whole week just to get acclimated with the catchers and everyone else involved. So that definitely makes sense. And with the timeline of it being May, I know that's pretty surprising in terms of what the Pirates used to do. But whenever, like you said, whenever they called O'Neal Cruz late, we were expected to lose 100 games, in which we did. So it makes sense that they want to manipulate that service time, knowing that Cruz for, a month or so extra wasn't going to give us a playoff spot. That's just the reality of it. So it makes sense, even though we're unfortunately struggling to start. We're expected to reach at least 80 games, considering we went 76 and 86 last year. So it makes more sense from a competitive standpoint that this is the year that we would bring up a top prospect early. So it's going to be interesting. Obviously, Skenes is probably the best pitching prospect the Pirates have ever had. Even with Garrett Cole being picked, I think Paul Skenes is a more hyped up prospect just because of what he did in the minors and his season at LSU. So.
Skenes, Jones, Keller, and that is a pitching trio that can win you playoff games and get you to playoff games and hopefully get you to a World Series. That's what you're hoping, because the best teams always have the best starting pitching and the best bullpen. And the Pirates have been good in both areas. Of course, there's been some weaknesses. Bednar hasn't been as good. Chapman's Chapman, but both of those things are looking good, and I give Sherrington a lot of credit for that. However, for year 5 of a rebuild, the offense, the lineup the way it is right now, and some of the players that are on this roster is unacceptable, really. So I want to hear your guys' thoughts on how do you feel Sherrington has done at this point? And is he being stubborn in a way for not bringing guys up? Because we said last week, we need to start calling guys up. We know it's May, but the time is now. If you're if you really want to win more than 76 games, the time is now to get people up here. And they haven't done it. They're sticking to the same guys. And I'm just feeling like if they don't do something this week, if they don't, I know to bring up Skenes, but I feel like you got to have a Gonzalez or a Bay up here too. Do you feel like Sherrington is just being stubborn? What's the phrase? Stubborn against his
ego.
Stubborn stubborn to a bad point, essentially.
Yeah, he's being stubborn, but for a different reason. I honestly, to be honest, I don't see the upside in bringing up anyone really. I mean, I think, G1 Bay, Michael A. Taylor, I feel like you're kind of splitting hairs. I feel like we know what G1 Bay, unless he can hit, if he can hit like he did his rookie year. But last year, if you're hitting 238, right, maybe you steal a couple bases, but providing no defense. I know he's flexible defensively, but he's not a great defensive outfielder, whereas Michael A. Taylor is really good defensively. Nick Gonzalez, he strikes out way too much. He's actually cut down on that a little bit in the minors this year, but he was Charrington's first overall selection in 2020, right? He was like 6th or 7th overall or something like that, I believe. So I don't know. I feel like he's being stubborn in that he hasn't fired Haynes. He hasn't changed the hitting philosophy of the whole organization, because every hitter that comes up to the Pirates has struggled, right? We saw it with Nick Gonzalez. We saw it. Liover Peguero played pretty well, but he hit 230 still. G1 Bay struggled in his second year. Henry Davis was hit 160, right? So these players that we thought had so much more potential just have really struggled to hit. And I think that since it's a common occurrence among all these hitters, I feel like that needs to be changed sooner. But I mean, in terms of bringing people up, I mean, you can do it, but I feel like it's not going to really change anything, because in my mind, if you bring up G1 Bay, he's just going to hit the same as he did last year, unless there's a major change organizationally to how they hit and kind of the strategy involved. They take way too many pitches. They swing at pitches in the dirt when they do swing. It's just not a good recipe for success offensively for me.
So from what you're saying, you feel that it's more of, I feel it's more of who's on the field. I think Andy Haynes is a problem, but I think he's a bit of a scapegoat. That's just my opinion. I think he's bad, but at the same time, I feel like some of the players that you're putting on the field are not should not be on the field at this point in year 5 of Sherrington. And that's where I'm a little more harder on Sherrington in that way. More than I'm harder on Haynes, because I feel like you're saying the philosophy needs to change more so than who's on the field. I think it's a little bit of both. I really do.
Yeah,
I
think
disagree.
it's
I think Bay. I really like Bay. I think Bay could be really good for us. But you know what? He could come up here and stink because of Andy Haynes. So it's hard to say. And then another question is like Shelton. Like I feel like Shelton kind of gets lost in all of this because Shelton, I feel like, has this decision making in all of this too.
Yeah, I mean, he is a hitting coach, right? And we haven't seen much of him criticize maybe himself, criticize Andy Haynes at all. We haven't seen Ben Cherington do that. And definitely, I do agree, Peyton. Ben Cherington deserves a lot of criticism for the roster and the lack of moves maybe this offseason, right? Rowdy Tellez is a prime example. Everyone knows Carlos Santana is a better overall fit, even if you don't want to spend money at first base. Carlos Santana, we've seen what he's done with the Pirates. He's doing pretty well right now with Minnesota in terms of being a leader, a clubhouse guy. And I know they say Rowdy is too, but he's just not providing what you need offensively at all. And defensively, he's just not great either. Michael A. Taylor, I thought was a pretty good signing at the time. I think he's just in a little bit of a slump right now. And I think he will.
Bad.
Yeah, I know, but he had 21 home runs last year, right? So, like,
Yeah,
you're
but
banking on that's what you're banking on, and he's shown power when he's had time. He's just not. I think we talked about this before. Some of these guys aren't guys that you should be starting every day, right? Michael A. Taylor shouldn't be starting every day. He shouldn't be starting against right-handers, especially. Everyone LeVar shouldn't be starting against right-handers all the time either, right? But it does get to the point of like some of these players are getting interchanged and everything. And so if you're not playing every day, maybe you don't get into the offensive rhythm that you would if you are getting consistent at bats and not just coming off the bench, or a defensive replacement in the 7th or 8th inning.
and I think a lot like the righties versus lefties stuff. Lefties, it's like pick your poison. Either way, like okay, Oliveira stinks against righties, but what you're gonna have Sawinski play, and he hasn't done anything. And anyway, I'm gonna let Jake, but there's another point I want to get to about Rowdy Tellez, but I want to hear what Jake has to say about this first.
Yeah, I mean, first, like, I love Charrington's drafting and how he acquires guys. He gets a lot of guys that are ultra competitive, right? I mean, you hear guys, Andy Rodriguez, he talks about all the time how much he wants to win. Bubba Chandler does the same thing. Henry Davis, Paul Skenes is, all he talks about is he wants to have this team compete for a World Series. Like, all they talk about is winning. But unfortunately, like you guys have mentioned, stubbornness is going to happen. And unfortunately, like, a lot of people wanted Haynes fired after year 1. I'm like, okay, just relax a little bit because you have to see the offense he's dealing with. I mean, you can't put all the blame on him. But now it's year 3, you're not seeing any improved results. So I definitely think that some kind of change has to be made in that regard. And I've probably talked your guys' ear off about this, and you're probably like, oh, Christ, he's gonna say this again. But I really think that we had our hitting coach in Rick Eckstein. It's tough that, like, I know it wasn't Charrington's guy, but at the same time, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I know 2019, everyone was hitting home runs, right? But Josh Bell hitting 37 or how much he hit, I mean, that's such an improvement from the 12 he hit the year before. And then you go in 2021, Brian Reynolds had a career year. Adam Frazier had a career year before he got traded and then couldn't figure out how to hit again. So I really liked Rick Eckstein. He just had these guys play like themselves, and it kind of worked out to me. Like, I just don't see a reason why you get rid of him. I think that's the one knock on Charrington at that point is that I get you want to have your guys, but at the same time, if you see something that's working, you don't need to fix it. So that's just my regard. I love how Charrington drafts and acquires players, but the stubbornness is starting to get the downfall of the Pirates right now.
Those are some really good points about guys that had career years with Eckstein, and now they're not the same. Like, and I met Eckstein once at a Pirate Fest. He really nice dude. He gave me like some hitting advice. Like, it was like, this is super genuine. I don't know Andy Haynes. But yeah, Sherrington, I mean, like I said, I don't know how much Shelton is involved on that part as well. But, this is a guy who he did a commercial for the speed hitter. Like, it's hard for me to take him seriously sometimes. Now, on to some of the players. I want to talk about Rowdy Tellez. I mean, this guy, out of all this whole offense is bad, but out of all the guys, I think he arguably is the worst right now. You paid him $2.5 million, which isn't a lot, right? You got him cheap. That was the point. Do you think there's a chance that if he isn't doing anything by end of June, early July, that we just cut our losses with him and we just DFA him? Is there any chance of that happening? And do you guys think that we're going to eventually commit to Connor Joe being the everyday first baseman, righties or lefties? Because the guy, arguably, if the All-Star break was today, Connor Joe and Jared Jones would be our 2 All-Stars. And I mean, I don't know if they have room for Connor Joe, but like, Connor Joe is having the best season of his career, and it's not even that close. He's hitting 290, 3 homers, 14 ribbies. I mean, the production it's not like he's had a lot of guys to drive in, right? So just want to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a tough one for me because is Rowdy Tellez going to be? Could they DFA him, get rid of him if he's hitting it that poorly at that time, that late in the year? With every other organization, I probably would say, oh, for sure, definitely, it's going to happen. With this organization, I seriously doubt that because, 1 year, $2.5 million, that would be a bench player, right, for every other franchise, right? Somebody who comes in, every, twice a week maybe and plays first. But for us, he's our prize first baseman, right? Charrington's prize first baseman. But this team and this front office has shown that they're not result oriented, right? Last year is a prime example, 20-8, year 4. We started to struggle a little bit, right? After that start. And just a little, we were struggling a little bit. We were just kind of 500 after that. And instead of doing anything major, right, bringing anybody up, doing anything different to address kind of the struggles, Charrington did nothing, right? They didn't even, when we were 20-8, he was just like, yeah, this is a good start so far. There's nothing really to emphasize there. And we end up going way off, going off the rails, and in 76 and 86. I don't know. It's just I haven't seen from this front office, from Bob Nutting either, for sure. And he deserves a lot of blame too as well, and we all know that. But I just haven't seen a willingness to put our chips on the table and really go for it. And this offseason, this was the same. We did the same basically this offseason we did last offseason, right? We brought in some fringe.
Yeah. I was
No,
going to say, I think this offseason, I don't mean to interrupt, I'll let you continue, but this offseason, in terms of who we brought in on offense, was worse than last offseason. And we were supposed to be better this year,
Yeah. We went from Carlos Santana to Rowdy Tellez, like we mentioned, right? It's not linear. It's not linear at all.
No.
We brought in, we were supposed to address pitching, right? We were supposed to get some pitchers, right? Because we knew coming into the year pitching was going to be an issue, and it really hasn't been, surprisingly. But we brought in Martin Perez, who had like a 4.50 ERA, and he's been a guy who's going to give you innings, but a 4.50 ERA. And we brought in Marco Gonzalez coming off a nerve injury, which no one really has shown they are the same after coming back from nerve injuries. So, definitely this offseason they didn't do it. And obviously, offensively, bringing in, I thought the Ariel Olivares acquisition was pretty good. But even as best, he's still a pretty mid-level player, right? I thought they, if you're really going for it, if you're showing a real willingness to win, you're gonna sign somebody or trade for somebody who is maybe not the star, right? But like the Yankees did with Juan Soto, but at least an outfielder or a hitter that was going to go out there and play every day. I don't think personally Ariel Olivares is that guy. I think he can play most days for sure, but he's not someone who's going to hit 25 homers and drive in a lot of runs, and defensively, he's really not that great either. But with all that's to say is I really like Ariel Olivares, but like I said, and with Connor Joe, your second question, Peyton, I don't know. I think Shelton and Haynes, they're very keen on, we start players, lefties, lefty pitcher, we're gonna start all righties, righty pitcher, we're gonna start all lefties. They've shown a little bit, I think, recently of starting Connor Joe a little bit more. But is that
They're
going to
leaning that way
continue?
for sure.
I hope they're leaning that way. I think they definitely should right now. Connor Joe's our best hitter right now, which is kind of crazy to think about. But I hope they go that way. I just don't know. I can't trust what this organization does really hitting wise for sure.
I think this all to one point. There is just an unwillingness to adapt because of ego and stubbornness. And this goes in all phases of life, all phases of sports. If you're not willing to adapt, this is what the Steelers are doing. The Steelers are finally adapting in some ways, right? With Omar Khan. If you're not willing to adapt, you're going to die. Adapt or die, right? And that is just the core issue. But yeah, go ahead, Jake. I want to hear what you have to say, of course.
Yeah, no, I agree with assuming Tellez is going to get DFA'd at some point. I think it's going to be a lot longer than a lot of people expect, right? I mean, if you look back in 2022, look how long it took Yoshi Tsutsugo and Josh Van Meter to get DFA'd, right? It felt like they were on the roster since July or August,
Oh my
or
God.
until July or August. So I doubt it's going to happen sooner rather than later. But I feel like it's the inevitable. And yeah, Nate, like you said, I mean, to me, if you're constructing a lineup, especially with how much uncertainty we had, I agree at the first, 3 weeks of the season, you platoon heavy, especially in the outfield and the first base spot. But now you're seeing what these guys can do now over a month in. And I don't think platooning is necessary. You don't have a platoon advantage just because he's a lefty hitting off a righty, right? I mean, for a guy like Tellez, if you're batting 200 on the year and a majority of his at-bats are against a righty, that's not a platoon advantage to a Connor Joe who's batting 290. Probably had very similar splits between the two. So, I mean, to that regard, it just doesn't make sense to platoon heavy at this point. But yeah, I have a feeling we'll see Tellez DFA probably a little bit later. I don't think it'll be as long until the deadline, but I think he'll be on the team throughout May for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And honestly, this Celeste situation reminds me of the Tsutsugo situation. But we paid Tsutsugo more. We paid him $4 million. So so that's why they kind of held Tsutsugo till like August. So they could cut their losses maybe a little sooner. And I think probably the sooner the better, because if you really want to win games, if you cut him when we're 15 to 20 games under 500, hopefully we don't get to that point. But if we do, which there's a possibility, then what's the point? You should have done that earlier. Well, we want to call guys up. Well, no, you should have called guys up sooner. And another point, I do agree with Jake. We've had a problem with Shelton changing the lineup in this platooning. And I'm hoping that now that we're a month in, right, maybe that platooning was just kind of, okay, I need to see what we're trying to do, but that tuning will now turn into having a more consistent lineup and having guys at certain positions more consistently. But based on what Shelton's done in the past, I don't know if that's going to change. Now, the only way I see Rowdy Tellez making an impact is if somehow he starts to get hot, right? Which I don't know. I don't see that happening. I'm becoming hopeless. Or like Nathan said, he becomes like a guy who plays twice a week and comes off the bench and is a really nice bench piece off the bench. Because we still haven't figured that out yet. Like, who's that bench guy that comes up and has a clutch pinch hit? Last year it was Palacios. Maybe Tellez could fit into that role. As a guy who can come in and get a pinch hit knocker, a pinch hit homer, because he obviously, with his size, he's a home run threat. But yeah, Paul Skenes, by the way, he starts doing really good and he starts hanging around, I'm gonna grow back my summer stash. Last summer I had a summer stash, and I'm gonna bring it back if he's around and starts doing really well. It's a horrible mustache, but I'll do it for Skenes. If we get going, huh?
I just said bet. Yeah, bet.
You bet me.
I'll do the same too.
Will we
We'll
all
all
grow
do.
summer
We'll all do it.
stashes?
That'd
Oh
be
boy.
crazy.
So I want to move on to Steelers briefly. So the most recent news, which I thought was just strange, Scotty Miller. Steelers signed Scotty Miller to a 1-year deal. This is the 4th guy that we've signed that's probably going to be a depth piece. I have it written down here. Michael Pruitt, the tight end, Van Jefferson, Scotty Miller, and Cordero Patterson. Those are 4 guys now that we've signed that are Arthur Smith's guys that Arthur Smith works for, has worked with. So my question is, like, are the Steelers smart in buying in to what Arthur Smith is going to be doing this quickly? I know these guys are backups, but it's a real sign when you sign 4 guys that have worked with Arthur Smith that you're really buying into what Arthur Smith is doing. Do you guys trust Arthur Smith? Do you like what he's going to bring to the Steelers? Should we really buy into it, or is it a wait and see kind of thing? Like, how do you feel about Arthur Smith? Because he's a very polarizing figure because of what he did in Atlanta and then what he did in Tennessee.
Yeah, I think it's more of a wait and see right now. I actually am a little bit higher on Arthur Smith than I think some people. Obviously, he was a great coordinator at Tennessee, but it's hard to go from coordinator to head coach, right? It's so much different. There's so many more responsibilities. I feel like that maybe weighed on him a little bit. I'm not sure. I have no idea how the Falcons, how they went about their business, but I have a little more confidence in him. And if you're the Steelers, they must be confident in him for sure if they're going to sign these guys, right? With the confidence that Arthur Smith has in them. Van Jefferson, I mean, he was with the Falcons a little bit last year, basically the whole year last year, but he had a really good year with the Rams, right? I think it might have been the year they won the Super Bowl. He had like 800 receiving yards, right? So he could be a nice, 4-3 for sure in an ideal offense, assuming the Steelers get another wide receiver, which we haven't heard really anything substantive on yet. Scotty Miller, Bucs legend. I mean, he's a speedster. He's really fast, right? But he's not going to give you much, right? Like you mentioned, Peyton, he's definitely going to be a depth piece. The tight end for sure is going to be a depth piece as well, right? Somebody most likely on the practice squad for the majority of the year. I don't know if you believe in him, like this looks like the Steelers do. You're going to let this happen, right? Omar Khan must believe in him, right? I mean, they hired him. He's going to be our offensive coordinator. And after Matt Canada, after the futility that was our offense last year with Matt Canada, you have to be really certain on a guy if you're going to hire him, right? So that's what I was looking for. Like, whoever the Steelers signed, I thought was going to be someone they have the utmost confidence in, because this can't happen again, right? It just can't with the skill position players that we have. So, I mean, if he wants to bring in his guys, right, they must have confidence that they're going to produce in his style of offense. So I'm all right with it, but it definitely is a wait and see. I'm definitely slightly concerned just overall, just going into the year, just based on how bad our offense was. But I'm kind of optimistic, right? Just based on his success with Tennessee.
Cautiously
previously.
optimistic.
Cautiously optimistic. There you go.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, to me, with a guy like Arthur Smith, it makes sense that they're gonna grab guys that are gonna work well with him and guys he knows how to utilize. Because I always say, if you're signing free agents, you don't sign them just to sign them. You need a certain plan involved. And with that, it's just to cater towards Arthur Smith. I mean, we have 2 running backs that have performed very well last season. We know Arthur Smith likes to run the ball. We also know that play action is going to be involved a lot. That's why we probably brought Russell Wilson in. And I know that George Pickens isn't a guy that Arthur Smith worked with, but he's a guy that is so good that it doesn't matter what the system is. He's the number 1 receiver. He's going to be productive. And it's going to be interesting to see with the receivers we have how they're going to be involved, it looks like Roman Wilson, unless we go grab another guy, is going to have a major impact on this offense, whether like no matter what happens, right? And it seems like Calvin Austin's going to be used more, even though he's an Arthur Smith's guy. We brought in other guys, but I feel like Calvin Austin could definitely have more of an impact, especially now that Deontay Johnson's gone. So it makes sense for sure. And I'm curious to see what Arthur Smith does, especially with, a Steelers team that's very hard nosed. And now we're again going to utilize the running game a lot. So I think it'll be interesting.
I think there's a delicate balance between, trying to fit what Arthur Smith wants to do and letting him have his guys, right? There's a balance between that and also getting the best players available and the best players for your team. So I just hope that they don't make it more let's just do whatever Arthur Smith wants to do. There's a balance with that. And that's my only concern. But like, these guys are depth pieces. Now back on the Scotty Miller thing, like what confused me about that is, okay, now from my count, you have 6 receivers. You have 2 receivers who I think are going to be starters for sure. George Pickens and Roman Wilson. And Roman Wilson, I think, is a slot piece. But then you have 4 guys after that: Van Jefferson, Scotty Miller, who am I forgetting? Quez Watkins, and Calvin Austin. Those guys are good enough to make NFL rosters, but they're not necessarily, they're borderline starters. They're not necessarily anything that special. But now you have 6 receivers. You typically keep 6. So do you think that the Scotty Miller signing decreases their chances that they're going to go after a wide receiver 2 on the outside through trade now? And I do also want to say, to the Steelers' credit on who they brought in, they are all fast. All of these guys have ran 4.3s and 4.4s. And Calvin Austin, he's more, I think he's going to be more used as a gadget more than a receiving weapon. But you never know because he's very small. But he's a guy, if he's route running is good enough, you can line him up on the outside, he can go. But he's not going to do any get any jump balls or anything like that, most likely.
Yeah, in terms of Scotty Miller, I don't really think it has any impact on whether the Steelers get a wide receiver 2 or not. I am kind of confused about, Scotty Miller's a slot guy. We have a lot of receivers that are more slot guys that on this roster right now. But he's had like 150 receiving yards like his last few years. He's not gonna be a big part of the Steelers offense, I don't think, at all. I wouldn't be surprised I would be kind of surprised if he was cut, by, start of the season. But I feel like he's going to stay with the team just because of the Arthur Smith connection, like we've detailed. But I don't think it really impacts anything in terms of the Steelers looking for a wide receiver 2. I think they definitely need that, especially since I really don't. These are, NFL caliber players, but I just don't think. I think a lot of people are underselling the impact that Deontay Johnson had as a receiver. I know, there was the drops and everything, and the lack of effort in some ways, but he was still a very productive receiver, right? And there were, obviously the concerns about him. Every time he caught the ball, he went horizontally instead of vertically. It's just so puzzling. I don't know why he did that, but he had a big impact on this team for sure. And he was dynamic. He was fast for sure. And Carolina got a good receiver in Deontay Johnson. I don't think Miller, I don't think Jefferson, I don't think Austin as a unit will do a tremendous job replacing him. And even if they do, there's still wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 production that might not be had for the Steelers. So I think they still need to look for a wide receiver 2.
I think, like you said, if those are their 6 guys, I agree about the Deontay Johnson thing. Like, he will be missed. He will. Because he was a great route runner. He could play in the slot. He could play in the outside. But I think if they get another option, then I think it'll be fine. It won't be that much of a difference. And so then if they do get another guy, it's like you're probably not going to keep 7 receivers on the roster. So which one of those 4 would you cut? And I'm not sure because all those guys have had experience and kind of bring the same thing to the table. So that's going to be interesting to see for sure. But anyway, go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, I mean, right now, if I had to predict how we're going to utilize these guys, I have to. It's so tough because it's still early on, but I feel like they'll be comfortable with Pickens and even Van Jefferson on the outside and have Roman Wilson at least start as a slot, even if he transitions to the number 2 guy. But I don't think these signings really impact if we're going to make a trade or not to get another receiver. I mean, Omar Khan stated in the Pat McAfee show that the rumors were false, that they were nearing a trade towards an impact receiver. He said those rumors aren't true. So I don't know what to make of that. Yeah, like he could just be saying that to not give away any hints or anything. But
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of that, but I don't think that all at all impacts, because even though these are NFL guys and players that, like you said, Peyton, should make an NFL roster, there's no guarantee all of them will. So I don't think that they're going to be losing too much if they grab another guy in all these, veteran pieces and depth pieces that we've gotten. So I don't think it really impacts our chances at all of getting a number 2 receiver. So we'll have to see how that all works out.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was surprised. I mean, you have to admit though, I was very surprised by that signing, the Scotty Miller thing. That kind of just came out of nowhere.
Oh, for
And
sure.
one last Steelers thing. I touched base on this last week, but I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts. I made my feelings about I may have talked more about Justin than Russ, and I'll briefly go over it again. But like, how do you guys feel Russ and Justin? What are your expectations for them? Do you think Russ will take the reins and like be the starter the whole year? Do you guys think Justin comes in and takes over? Do you think how do you guys think those guys fit into Arthur Smith's offense? Because it's really that's the question mark, because this roster is pretty decent. But what could affect them is who's at receiver too. So I just want to hear your guys' thoughts on Russ and Justin, because we touched on that, but I want to hear more in depth about Russ and Justin.
Yeah, so in terms of the quarterback responsibility between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, I genuinely think the Steelers are going to ride with Russell Wilson this year. I mean, and I agree with that. I think for this year, if you look at the numbers, he, I mean, last year, 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Those are quality quarterback numbers, right? Justin Fields hasn't proved that he can, and Russell Wilson gets unfairly trashed, I think, a lot just because he's not playing at the performance and the level that he was in Seattle. He's on the back half of his career, right? If you get 25-8 this year from Russell Wilson, I think every Steeler fan would take that for sure, especially with the 10 touchdowns we've scored like last season combined for quarterbacks. I think that's the direction the Steelers are going to go in. I think it's what Omar Khan and what Mike Thomas alluded to, right? They've said he's in pole position, so they're being a little bit, one of the Tomlinisms, right, that he likes to use. But I think Russell Wilson's going to be now. Does that mean if he starts, kind of having a couple games that are kind of iffy, a lot of fans will want to turn to Justin Fields, and I don't know. I think he would definitely be a capable starter for sure. And I think he's shown a lot. And if his pass game can improve a little bit, right? We know he can run. He's shown that. And his pass game's like, okay. But if he can improve that just a little bit, I feel like he could easily be the starter this year for the Steelers. But I just have a feeling they're going to. I think last year with all the quarterback drama, right, with Kenny Pickett starting for a while and then getting hurt, bringing in Mason Rudolph, or Mitch Trubisky first, then bringing in Mason Rudolph. I just think the Steelers kind of want to avoid a little bit of that this year. If Russell Wilson's playing decent. We just need adequate quarterback play, right? This year, just get the ball to the receivers, hand the ball off, don't fumble or nothing, and don't throw any bad interceptions. We didn't really, other than Mitch Trubisky, the Steelers quarterbacks didn't do that last year either, but they weren't throwing touchdowns, right, when they were open players too. So, and I think, if Russell Wilson also, I think Pat Freiermuth this year will be a big target for Russell Wilson. I just have a feeling I think he has so much potential, and I think he's been kind of underused by a lot of the Steelers quarterbacks, especially with Kenny Pickett. Pat Freiermuth could be a really big target for Russell Wilson. But I think that's how it's going to be. I think they will bring Justin Fields in a little bit just because he's much better than he's the best backup in the league probably, right? He's one of the best at least, and I think he needs to be used a little bit for sure. I think the Steelers want to use him just knowing the immense talent he has, right? Ohio State was a really good quarterback. He has so much talent. He showed a lot of that talent with the Bears. I hope he is not returning kicks this year. If he is, that will not be ideal. I don't know why that was thrown out. It's kind of crazy, but I think Russ is gonna be a starter unless Justin Fields. I feel like though if he in camp, right, and in the preseason, and we know preseason we showed with Kenny Pickett last year, preseason the hype can be a little bit overblown. But if he has a good preseason, a good camp, I think Justin Fields could potentially usurp Russell Wilson as the first quarterback, QB1 for the Steelers. But I think that's kind of unlikely, which by the rhetoric they've been using so far in the offseason.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think shoot, I forgot what I was gonna say. You know what? Go ahead, Jay. I forget what I was gonna say. It happens. It happens.
No worries at all. No, I agree with you, Nate. I highly doubt that Russell Wilson is going to get pulled unless he's just absolutely awful. It's just once he came in, the Steelers made it known that he was the starter. That's a big reason why Pickett left, right? I mean, it went from Pickett's going to have competition to now Russell Wilson is the starter. So I highly doubt that they're going to move on, or not move on, but make a quarterback change unless it's absolutely necessary. But would I love to see Justin Fields start? Yes, just because I feel like finding the quarterback of the future is important. Justin Fields is still young. He was a top 10 pick overall. So I want to see that. But the realistic scenario is that Russell Wilson is going to start. Fields is going to be brought back on probably a 1-year prove-it deal because I don't think he's going to want to sign a multi-year deal worth what he doesn't think he should be paid. I think he's going to sign for a 1-year deal next year. Pretty much a pay cut of what his 5th-year option would be, just to kind of see how he's going to do as the starter next year before we make a decision to pay him. And it's kind of unfortunate we're in that reality because I feel like the best way you can win is having a quarterback under a rookie window before you have to pay him, just so you can construct the roster around him. But we are doing that with Russell Wilson being on a cheap deal. Obviously, Fields is still technically on his rookie deal, but the quarterback situation is going to be interesting in the future for sure, but I doubt Russell Wilson's going to not be the starter at any point during the year.
Let's ride. Or Steelers country, let's well.
Steelers country, let's ride.
He's got to come up with something new. Oh, shoot. You know what? My computer's going to die. I got to plug this in. But what I was going to say, I remember what I was going to say. What concerns me about the whole bringing in Justin Fields thing is this is part of Nate's point. I'm concerned that if Russ does bad, 1 or 2 games, all of a sudden there's just going to be this Russell Wilson versus Justin Fields war in the media and in the fan base. Should Fields start? And it's just going to be a big distraction. And that's what this team, because this team has always had distractions. And I feel like Omar Khan's trying to change that. And I feel like could be a big, having a quarterback controversy could be a big wall preventing this team from getting where it needs to be. I made my feelings clear about Justin Fields. I'm not a big Justin Fields fan. I think if Russ stinks, then I don't really like our chances this year. If Justin Fields comes, so I'm really counting on Russ to be, like Nate said, 26-8 type of guy. Now, that 26-8 doesn't tell the whole story. Russ had some bad games last year, but I feel like he got a little better as the year went on. And I'm hoping that kind of and of course he got benched, but I don't think that had anything to do with how he was playing necessarily. But anyway, so Russ, I think, fits very well into Arthur Smith's offense. They both like to do play action. And I feel like that's kind of how they match up. However, and I think Arthur Smith does things that Russ needs to start doing, which I think Arthur Smith can actually get Russ to do, which is throw the ball down the middle of the field more, because Russ never did that in Denver. And you could say, well, that makes it a bad fit. I think Arthur Smith, if he designs the reads for Russ to be able to throw it down the middle of the field, then, you know, they'll have success. And I feel like if he could get Russ to maybe make reads quicker too, because Russ held the ball way too long, right? So I think they're a good fit in those aspects. Whereas Justin Fields, he's more of a runner and not much of a passer. And Arthur Smith's had athletic quarterbacks, but he's never really had a guy like Justin Fields. And I don't see how that really fits. And like I said last week, he's Kenny Pickett in disguise. The guy can't make a read. And he was one of the worst fourth quarter quarterbacks. But the athletic upside is what makes him interesting. And obviously, I think he's a better option than Kenny Pickett would have been as a backup. And there's some optimism there. So I mean, do you guys think Russ will succeed? Like, if you had to guess right now, like, and the season started tomorrow, like, what is your outlook on what Russ will be? Like, is he more of a C or B plus or B plus quarterback? Like, how many wins can he realistically get this team?
Yeah, I think he's kind of a B minus. I think maybe split the difference there. I don't know. It depends on what you define as success. I mean, making the playoffs, and Russ having kind of similar numbers as the last year, and there might be a couple bad games in between, but I mean, a lot of quarterbacks have a couple bad games, but Russ's bad games, especially like the first few games of the season last year, were just awful games he had. But if he has similar numbers to last year and a similar impact, and if he's just average, really, if he's slightly above average, which he was last year, I think the Steelers will have some success. And what is that success? Well, a lot of it depends on schedule, right? A lot of it depends on who you're playing. We know you're going to play Baltimore, you're going to play Cincinnati, Cleveland, but I think 10 wins is definitely within reach. I think like last year, and it's a better team overall than last year. So I mean, it's hard to predict, kind of wins at this point, of the offseason, but I think they're definitely going to be a playoff contender for sure. Now, are they going to be able to get over the hump of a wild card game, which has been so difficult? They haven't won a playoff game in 6 years, 7 years.
7.
So 7 years, yeah. So is that going to happen this year? I have no idea. A lot of it depends on Russell Wilson. If he can have a game, a performance, just one game too, or a couple games, if he gets hot like he did when he was in Seattle, then anything can happen really. And the Steelers could go, farther than we might think. But at this point, I think they're just kind of a slightly better version of who they were last year. And they're kind of a 10-7, maybe 11-6 if a lot of things go right.
I think I was going to say, like, in my opinion, like they're a 10. My expectation for them is for Russ to be B to B plus, and for them to win 10 games, but to actually be a team. And I said this on my podcast. I may have said this last week, but to be a 10-win team, you look at and say that team could go into someone's house as a wild card team and win a playoff game. And that's my expectation for them, is to have a real chance to be really a better version of a 10-win team and have a real chance to win a playoff game. Jake, if you want to wrap us up, and then we're going to get into the big segment I have planned for us today.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's just common sense that the Steelers are going to be a better team with this upgrade at quarterback, right? Not only did we upgrade a quarterback, but we got key guys. Patrick Queen's a huge addition. But yeah, I feel like we're going to improve. Even if we only win 10 games again, I feel like we'd have a better shot in the playoffs as a 10-win team in 2024 than we did last year. So I definitely think we're going to improve. Well, do I think we're a Super Bowl competing team right now? Unfortunately, no. And while it's a team sport, it's not just the quarterback, but I'm just not confident in my chances with going into his age 36 season quarterback, who, as much as the Broncos were kind of not the greatest team, he didn't show signs that he was in the Seahawks form of his career. So that just makes me doubt a little bit. And a lot of people will say, oh, these 1-year fixes, or even though they ended up playing longer, but like, oh, these like quick fixes at quarterback, they worked, right? Tom Brady and Stafford, for example. But Tom Brady's the greatest
That's
quarterback of
not
all
the
time.
same.
It's not the same. Yeah, Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback of all time, and it took multiple first round picks to bring in Stafford. Wilson got cut, and we were getting him for 1 million right now. So I don't think that
And
this is going to equate to a Super Bowl, but I do think we're going to improve. And if you want to see a team that's going to be at least competitive in the playoffs, I think this is definitely a move that makes sense for the Steelers, especially because now you can build your team around a $1 million quarterback. So,
and what concerns me is like the fact that Sean Payton hates him so much does concern me because I respect Sean Payton. They're really literally paying him 40 million to play against them. And that concerns me. So in the back of the common sense tells me that this is going to work. But I also have, just based on the last few years and the Steelers kind of, and Tomlin's incompetency with running an offense and picking the right coaches and the right players for the offense. In the back of my mind, it's like, this could be a disaster as well. So, and I think this season really does hinge on Russ. The quarterback is the most is the most important position of any team sport, arguably, in the world. Yeah. So anyway, let's wrap that up now. I'm gonna get into our final segment, our big segment, saving this best for last. So last week we touched on the Steelers draft, right? We didn't really get into what the other teams did, and especially like what the other teams did in the first round, second round, third round. And we're obviously not going to get that in depth. But based on we're at a point in the offseason now where it's like, okay, we can kind of see who the pretenders are and who the contenders are. But of course, we have training camp, injuries are going to happen, etc. So based on the draft and based on the offseason acquisitions, I'm going to have each of us pick our 7. If the season started tomorrow, who would we have as our 7 playoff teams in each conference? And I sat for about 45 to 50 minutes trying to figure this out, because especially the AFC side, because it's so tough. A lot of teams did a lot of good things, and then there's a lot of teams that are like, you have some doubts, but you like what they did, or you like what they were last year, but you're not so much sure about this year. So, who wants to start with that? Who wants to start with their AFC and NFC playoff teams for 2024, 2025?
I can start. Do you want me to start?
go for it.
Yeah, you're at the bottom of my screen, so you're gonna start. I don't know why, but that doesn't even make any sense. But just stop. What am I talking about?
Yeah. All right. So I did not take as long actually because I just think it's really. I mean, there could be moves still to be made. Who knows? There could be injuries, but and we're still pretty early in the off season, right? But so far for my AFC, I'll start with the AFC East. I don't have much confidence in this one, but I think the Bills win the AFC East at this point. I know they are very thin at receiver. They got Keon Coleman in the draft. I like that. It was kind of a puzzling move. They like moved back in the draft, like one spot. Like it didn't really make any sense, but they got their guy, I guess, Keon Coleman. He was pretty good. He's really good at making contested catches. I think that's important for Josh Allen and the Bills. So, and he's a big receiver. I like Keon Coleman, but other than that, I mean, they are very thin. They have Khalil Shakir. They have then their tight ends. Dustin Knox is pretty good, and they got some tight ends that are pretty good. But and their defense is all right. They have lost some defensive pieces. I mean, I don't have much confidence in my picks at all, but I could easily see Miami winning this division. And the wild card in this division, obviously, is the Jets. What are the Jets going to look like with Aaron Rodgers coming back right off of that injury? I just don't know. With Garrett Wilson, right, with some really star players for the Jets, I just don't know how that's going to turn out for them. But I would say at this point, the Bills win the AFC East. Okay. Baltimore wins the AFC North. They're just really talented still. I know they lost Patrick Queen, right, but they lost some of their running backs, J.K. Dobbins and others. But they got Derrick Henry, who is just a beast. He's just a beast. He's awesome. But I think Baltimore just overall is the deepest, most talented team in the North. I think in the AFC South, you're splitting hairs here for me. I really like what the Houston Texans have done, not only last year, but this offseason, addressing some needs. Obviously, CJ Stroud now acquiring Stephon Diggs was a really big signing for them. Now with Tank Dell, they have a nice wide receiver duo there for sure. And I like some of the defensive ads that they've made as well. I think they're going to win the AFC South. AFC West, this one's probably the easiest one. Kansas City Chiefs, chalk it up. It's going to happen. It happens every year. Last year, we thought, oh, it might not happen. And, 12-5. And, oh, they might not, make it very far. The Bills could beat them. Is this the year the Bills finally beat them? No. The Ravens, oh my gosh, number 1 seed. No. The Chiefs go in there and win, and then they're Super Bowl champs again. Patrick Mahomes, just awesome. So I have them winning the West, and then my wild card teams. So I mean, obviously, there's so many teams you could put in these spots, but I'm gonna first go with the Dolphins. I think they are a talented roster, a talented team. Still, even after some of the departures in free agency from Miami, you still have Tua, who's, and I feel like an underrated quarterback. I think he takes a lot of flack for some things, just being a regular season quarterback, I guess. And he does have to prove himself for sure. But I like the Dolphins with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. They're stacked offensively. I guess in the AFC North, I'm gonna, you can put really any of these teams in. I'm gonna go with the Steelers. That could change. My opinion could change really quickly, depending on the Bengals could easily make it as well for sure. But I'm gonna go with the Steelers just because of everything we mentioned before with Russell Wilson. Patrick Queen, like you mentioned earlier, Jake, a huge addition. I like the Steelers, what they've done this offseason. The Jaguars are my third wild card team. They might. I'm not going in order. They could be the first wild card team by record, but I just think with Trevor Lawrence, I think getting some wide receiver depth for sure in the draft, and Christian Kirk obviously being there still. I like the Jaguars. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to have a bounce back, so I like Jacksonville. So those are my AFC teams. Then for the NFC East, I think the Eagles are going to win it. I know they had a really rough year to end the year last season, but I just think that division is really underwhelming. Again, I think, and I don't think the Cowboys have what it takes to win that division this season. So I'm going to go with the Eagles out of the East. The North, the NFC North, both conferences, both North divisions are really good, I think, really deep this year. I'm going to go with the Lions again because I feel like they've continued to add to their defense, really, for sure. That was an area of weakness. If this team had a weakness last year, it was a little bit of the defense. And I think they did really well to that. I think they're going to be really good. NFC South, I'm buying the Atlanta Falcons hype. I don't think they're going to be great, but I think Kirk Cousins is a really good quarterback. And I think they have enough talent to win the South, which is not a good conference again, or not a good division again. And the NFC West, I'm going to go with the 49ers, maybe the most talented team in the league still. I just think with Brock Purdy, Deebo Samuel, and Brandon Ayuk, assuming they're still there, George Kittle, and Bosa, Nick Bosa, and all the defensive players that they have, they're just stacked as well. And then for my wild cards, I'm going to say the Cowboys, but a bold prediction I might have is that I think I could easily see the Cowboys missing the playoffs this year. Like I just don't think. I think they've lost a lot defensively. I think offensively, obviously, running back, they're very thin. Ezekiel Elliott, come on, they just got rid of him, and now they're bringing him back, and like, oh yeah, he's a running back one. It doesn't make any sense. I just don't. There's just something off, and like they're very CeeDee Lamb reliant offensively as well. If you have a good game, who are they going to go to? So I think the Cowboys, I'll have them in now, but that could easily change. I also have the Packers making it again. I think they had a great year last year. Nobody thought they were going to make the playoffs last year, and Jordan Love really came on at the end of last season. So I like the Packers and their young receivers. And then I'm going to say the Rams for my third wild card team, just the offensive talent that they have. I know they lost Aaron Donald, but I think defensively they have enough. So those are my 7 in each conference. Again, I could see Vikings certainly making. I could see the Tampa Bay Buccaneers making. I thought they had a good offseason as well. But yeah, so those are my picks.
All right.
All
Are
right,
you guys
Jake.
cool if I go? Or... Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Yep.
All right, so I'm gonna start with the AFC East. I also think the Bills make it. I know a lot of people are gonna be like, "Oh, they're off season," but like a lot of people said the same thing about the Chiefs whenever they won their first Super Bowl with Mahomes, how they lost all these guys and they still end up winning it all. I don't think it's gonna affect the Bills and Josh Allen as much. So I'm gonna go Bills. AFC North, I think the Ravens. I mean, their running offense is gonna be terrifying. Like you have a ground like a traditional just run over people running back in Derrick Henry. And then you got Lamar Jackson, who also has that speed element to that. And obviously, he's an amazing passer now, too. So I have the Ravens winning the AFC North. AFC South, I love the Texans. I'm huge in the CJ Stroud bandwagon now. He's just fantastic. He's a pure winner. And with how weak, I mean, the division's gotten better with Jacksonville, and even the Colts are gonna look to improve for sure. But I don't see a reason why the Texans shouldn't win that division if everyone stays healthy. The AFC West, betting against the Chiefs is like betting against Mike Tomlin having a winning season. So I have to go Chiefs with the AFC
It's
West.
destiny. It's destiny.
And so for my wild card teams, I also have the Dolphins and the Steelers, like Nate. I mean, the Dolphins are just extremely talented. They just have speed everywhere. That's so hard for cornerbacks, and now safeties aren't as hard of hitters because NFL rule changes. So I think the Dolphins are gonna make it. Steelers should improve. We already mentioned that, and I think the Bengals are gonna be the third wild card team. And I think if Joe Burrow is fully healthy, he's a winner. He took a Bengals team that had no business making the playoffs, brought them to a Super Bowl. I think he can deal with this roster for sure, even if Hendrickson leaves, even if T. Higgins leaves. I still think Joe Burrow can make the playoffs. So, and if when we go, going to the NFC side, I have the Eagles winning that division as well. I love their offseason. They tackled a huge position of need in cornerback and got Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, who could have been the two top cornerbacks in that draft if Terrion Arnold
It
wasn't.
was ridiculous that they pulled that off.
Yeah. So I mean, that right there is going to help them out a lot, and I think Jalen Hurts is too much of a competitor to have another season where they kind of just fall off at the end in our first round exits. So I have the Eagles there. NFC North, I have a hard time seeing the Lions not winning that division, even though it's going to be tougher for them now. It's just Dan Campbell has those guys ready every single week, and I just see them winning that division. NFC South, I have the Buccaneers repeating. I love their offense a lot. I think Baker Mayfield as well is a huge competitor. Obviously, you have an experienced head coach in Todd Bowles. Whether you like him or not, I think that they have a good chance to win that division. Obviously, the NFC West, you have to go the 49ers. I mean, not only are they great all around, but they added a jump ball, really. I mean, he has more elements to his game than being a jump ball receiver. But Ricky Pearsall, I think, was a fantastic addition. Even though he didn't show the stats at Florida, he played for 5 years. Still a great addition, and you still keep.
You're
those
talking about
receivers.
Frisco, right? Who are you talking about?
Ricky Pearsall,
Yeah, but what team?
49ers.
Yeah,
49ers.
the Niners.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought I missed when you went from Tampa Bay to San Francisco.
Oh no,
I missed that
no
transition.
worries.
Okay,
You're good.
my bad.
No worries at all. So wild card, like Nate said, I also have the Cowboys and the Packers. I don't think the Cowboys' lack of moves is really going to hurt them. I think that was more just to have flexibility for whenever they have to extend CeeDee Lamb, Michael Parsons, so on. I think they're going to be fine. Are they going to be worse? Probably than last year, but I still think they'll make it. I think the Packers are going to improve a lot. I could see them potentially winning 12 games and overtaking the Lions just because of how much better Jordan Love has gotten, how much that team really clicked at the end of the year, and I think they're only going to get better as young as they are. And I have the Falcons sneaking into the last wildcard spot. They won what 7 games last year, and now they have a better quarterback. I feel like that's common sense, but common sense doesn't always matter in football, so we'll see what happens. But I think the Falcons sneak into a wild card spot. So yeah, that's my predictions.
All right, well, I'm just gonna say you guys are boring.
We got a lot of
Yeah.
chalk.
Because
We got a lot of
y'all
chalk.
are not ready for my picks.
No, I can't wait.
I have like
You overthought it. I feel like 45
I'm
minutes.
going off the map.
Sometimes you
Huh?
gotta.
Okay.
Sometimes you have to go off the map. So
I'm going off the map because every year there's some new teams, some new playoff teams. Sometimes there are years where it's like pretty repetitive, but most of the time there's some new teams, and I have some new teams getting in. So AFC North, let's start with that. I think it's a coin flip. I think Cincinnati or Baltimore could win the division this year. I think Baltimore's the better team, the better roster. But Joe Burrow, I feel like everyone has forgotten about the impact of Joe Burrow. This guy came in, took a disastrous organization, a disastrous roster, took them to the Super Bowl. Then the next year took them to the AFC Championship. Then he gets hurt, and it's like, since we forgot about Cincinnati. Cincinnati has great weapons. Now T. Higgins might be traded, but it won't matter. And their defense has always been pretty good. They got Mike Hilton in the slot. I wish he was a Steeler still. He's still with Cincinnati, right? Yeah, I would believe so.
Yeah, I think so. I believe
Okay, so
yeah.
Hilton, right? But anyway, that's moot point. Baltimore, everything kind of went right for them last year. Lamar does have an injury history, but in their draft, I think Cincinnati and Baltimore both had meh drafts, to be honest with you. But I still like both. It's all about the quarterback. It's all about the quarterback, and both of those guys, whoever wins that division is going to have a high seed, and then whoever falls in second will be a wild card team. So I have Cincinnati and Baltimore coming out of the North. Kansas City, obviously, I don't need to explain that. Not to mention the fact they've added Marquise Brown and the kid from Texas. Then you have Rashee Rice, but don't know if he'll be playing this
Andy
season.
Reid's good with working
yeah,
with guys with off the field issues, so you never know.
Yeah, but like he's done two different things now. Did you hear about the most recent thing? I forget what it was.
Yeah.
But he did something
Yeah, he had
else.
like an altercation with somebody.
Right. Then I'm gonna go to the AFC East. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I am not excited about any team in the AFC East. I know there's a lot of talent in the AFC East with those three teams, Jets, Bills, Miami. But I have a lot of question marks with all three teams. Buffalo, their receiving core is not good anymore. Keon Coleman, I feel like that was a reach, to be honest with you. The guy ran a 4.6. I know he's a jump ball guy, but like, I don't know. I don't feel like that's going to carry your offense. But I do have, in Miami, right? They lost a lot of guys on defense. I think Tua is very overrated. The guy can't, he's one of these quarterbacks who everything has to be right for him for it to go right. He has a great offensive coach. He has great weapons. But, when you put him in the cold or you put him in a rough environment, he's nothing. So, so I'm not, Miami's just kind of like a flashy car to me. They're not they're fun to look at, but they're not fun when you get into the trenches, when you get into the 30-degree weather and it's snowing, right? You need that four-wheel drive. Miami doesn't have the four-wheel drive, in my opinion. So because I'm just picking the best quarterback, Josh Allen is the best quarterback in that division. The Jets, I like what they've done this offseason. They did draft 2 running backs. I don't know why. Like the Jets, I just can't trust them. And I think they're going to be decent. I think they have a chance to make a playoff spot, but I just can't trust them. I can't. And Rodgers is old and he's, he didn't play last year. I hope the Jets are good. For their sake, I hope they are, but I can't trust them. So I only have Buffalo coming out of the AFC East as the division winner. Then I think the AFC South, which I think was for a while, one of the bigger jokes in the league, is now become one of the better divisions in the league. I'm going to have Houston winning the division because I think other than the Chicago Bears, I mean, they were one of the top 3 offseasons. They had one of the top 3 offseasons. They got the edge rusher from Minnesota. They got Stephon Diggs. I know they did they got Joe Mixon, like an elite offseason. You have CJ Stroud, who's a superstar. You have I know I'm not a big defensive coach guy, but like D'Amico Ryans is a culture setter. I mean, what he did in last year, I know CJ Stroud came in. What he did was impressive. Their draft was relatively okay. So I have Houston winning the division. And so then that's where I get to my wild card teams. So right now I have 5 teams: Cincinnati, Kansas City, Houston, Buffalo, and Baltimore. So I have 2 wild card spots left. this first team I'm really high on, and I really believe that they are going to be a solid wild card team. They were this close last year to making it. And it's the Indianapolis Colts with Anthony Richardson. I know we don't really know what he's about, but the kid's an athlete and he has a great offensive coach and Shane Steichen. He could have easily won Coach of the Year last year if they made the playoffs. I mean, he made Gardner Minshew look good. They won 9 games. They were very close to beating Houston, getting in the playoffs. I think Anthony Richardson is a huge upgrade. And I think Steichen is going to really, really be a good is going to help him a lot. Their draft was really, really nice. Taking a look here at their draft teams. Colts. Where are we at, Indy? Yeah, they got the pass rusher from UCLA. Really, really like that pick. I think he's going to make an immediate impact. And they got Adonai Mitchell at 53. That was a pick after the Steelers. He should have been a first-round pick. You pair him with Michael Pittman. That team, they're good. They have a good O-line. They're improving their defense. Their back end of their defense was an issue last year. But I love the coach. I really like the quarterback. So Colts, I think, will be the 5th seed or the 6th seed. And then my final playoff team, this is so hard for me. But I doubt that they make the no, I'm not going to doubt it because I have them in. I have the Los Angeles Chargers in the playoffs. I know y'all aren't going to like that either, but I'm a Jim Harbaugh believer. I loved their draft. Lad McConkey, they got the tackle from Notre Dame. He's going to be a Hall of Fame, arguably a Hall of Fame player. Yep. They're building within the trenches. They're going to run the ball, and they're building that D-line up. They got some corners. They're going to be much better defensively, I think. I know Harbaugh's an offensive coach, but they're going to be a team that's going to be a run-first, punch-you-in-the-face type of team. But they also have Justin Herbert, who is the best quarterback that Jim Harbaugh has ever had the pleasure of coaching. He took Colin Kaepernick to a Super Bowl, and he made J.J. McCarthy into a first-round pick. And now you have Justin Herbert. I just love – and I think what convinced me with them is their draft. And then, so those are my 7 teams in the AFC. Jacksonville, I think, could easily make it, but I don't understand what happened to them last year. And I love Trevor Lawrence, but I have them pushed out because I just don't, they're a big question. I just don't know. Like, it's weird. Like, they were the one team I just couldn't figure out last year. So they're kind of like my 8th team. If there were 8th team, I'd have Jacksonville. NFC side. Okay, I'm going to make this quicker because I've been on way too long. The number 1 seed is going to be the winner of the NFC North. It's going to be the winner of the NFC North. I don't know who it's going to be. It's either going to be the Lions or the Packers, but that's going to be a fight to the finish for that division. Those teams are both going to have 12, 13, 14 wins, I think. I really like what the Packers did in the draft. You have Jordan Love, who's turning into a superstar talent. And the Lions, they didn't have as many picks, so they also had a great draft. They are fixing up the back end of their defense. And you have Dan Campbell, and you have their offensive coordinator coming back. A lot of people thought he'd get a head coaching job. He's back. So whoever wins that division gets the 1st seed. And the Packers, let's just say the Packers lose the division, they'll have the 5th seed. They'll be a really good wild card team. Then I do have Philadelphia winning their division. So this is more of, I don't love Philadelphia, but I don't like anyone else in their division really either. But they had an excellent draft, which kind of convinced me that they'll win their division. I have questions about the coach. I'm not a big fan of the coach. And I think I have questions about Jalen Hurts as well. But I think they're in a weak division. They went in with their draft. They really nailed the draft, fixed the back end of their defense. Philadelphia will win that division. San Francisco probably is the 3rd seed. I think Philadelphia is his 2 seed. I don't know. I could have either one of them as a 2 or 3 seed, but I think San Francisco falls off a little bit this year. I think they're still a strong playoff team. They have a strong coach, but they're getting a little older. Brock Purdy, I don't completely trust. Then their draft was decent, but a little weird. I think Ricky Pearsall was a reach. I just feel like you saw last year in the playoffs, they made the Super Bowl, but you saw like there were some things that were concerning, like the back end of their defense, their linebacker core is getting older. They'll win their division, I think, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Rams won that division and the 49ers are a wild card team. And that's so I have the 49ers and the Rams coming out of the West. So Lions, Packers, Eagles, 49ers, Rams. I have the Falcons winning the division. The Falcons had an abysmal first two picks, reaches on both those picks, but you have Kirk Cousins. I like the Raheem Morris hire, and I also like their offensive coordinator hire they got from the Rams. So I have Atlanta winning that division. And then it's my final wild card team. You guys are going to love this one the most. Chicago Bears, baby.
Oh.
Caleb Williams. He's going to ride us to the playoffs. There's going to be three. I think that's the only division. I have the AFC. What division is that? The NFC North. I have three teams. I think that's the only division in football. I have three teams coming out of as a playoff team. I think I think the Vikings are a decent team, but that quarterback situation is murky. So I think Caleb Williams comes in right away, makes an immediate impact. That's why he was the number 1 overall pick. I know there's some concerns about his ego, but if he's as good as projected, that's not going to be an issue at all. They brought in the OC from Seattle. They have arguably one of the best wide receiver corps in the NFL. You have added DeAndre Swift, and your defense last year was your strength. Especially towards the back end of the year, once they added the guy from Washington off the edge. So I really, really, really like the Bears to win 9 or 10 games and sneak in to the playoffs. Couple of teams that I kind of like, but I have missing. I think Arizona got a lot of draft capital. Excellent draft capital this draft. They took out a ton of guys. And these drafts, you never know. These guys are hit or miss. So if you get as many picks as possible, that's just going to improve your team. And then you got Mark MHJ. You have Kyler back fully healthy. You have James Conner, who's been consistent. I like even though he's a defensive coach, I like the coach from the Eagles. And then I could see them like maybe sneaking in. But I have them just out. Dallas, the wheels have to fall out eventually there. Like, who's your running back? McCarthy's going to have Dak throw the ball 40 times a game. I see Dallas falling off being a 500 team, kind of like Nate. Nate had them in the playoffs. I'm kicking them out. That's kind of one of my biggest moves. They could still win 11, 12 games like they did last year, just passing the ball. But they lost some guys too. And their draft was, I don't know, nothing special in my opinion. I do like their first round pick, the tackle from Oklahoma. He's a huge 6'8" kid. And then another team that I like that'll improve this year, but will just miss out is Washington. They also had a good draft. I like the Dan Quinn hire. I forget who their offensive coordinator is, but I think I like that too.
Oh, Cliff Kingsbury now.
Yeah, it's Kingsbury.
Yeah, Cliff Kingsbury. That's right. I'm a Kingsbury guy. I think he fits well with Daniels. That's going to be an improved team this year, but I don't think good enough to make the playoffs.
Wow, no Steelers. You don't have the Steelers, Peyton.
No, I know. I don't. I don't. I think the AFC is just too tough. If they were in the NFC, I think they'd make it. But I'm looking at these quarterbacks in the AFC, and Russ just doesn't line up with them. He doesn't.
I could definitely see a scenario where the Steelers miss it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah,
so
And the AFC is just so tough. And I think Cincinnati is being extremely overlooked. I think Cleveland has an excellent roster. I like them a lot, but I don't trust Deshaun Watson. I don't know they were better with Joe Flacco. And now you have Jameis Winston backing up Deshaun. That's just a weird situation. But they have a great coach. They have a really good roster. They're going to have Nick Chubb back. I think Cleveland could easily make the playoffs if Deshaun is decent and, not a distraction. But Deshaun. You know what? I may be biased. I just hate Cleveland. I can't have Cleveland in the play. I can't have them in my prediction. I can't do it. I don't have the heart. I told these guys let's keep it short and precise. But I said I did say I'm hypocritical for this because let's keep it precise, and I did not keep it precise at all, not one bit.
It's all good.
But I thought about this in depth. As I said, I thought about this for 50 minutes. So I had a lot to say. So that's going to do it for the BCS Podcast, Episode 2. I'm Pirate Peyton alongside Jake Bell and Nathan Schivins. I just said that so weirdly. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.